Good evening, everyone. This is Chetan Mughal with BIM Engineering US. Let me give you a quick background about myself. I'm the CEO of an American organization called BIM Engineering US. I've spent about 15 years in hardcore construction, engineering, and mostly focused on technology and project management. Graduated from Virginia Tech with my master's program in construction management. Went to Harvard to study some business schools, and so that's kind of my journey. I constantly learn. I went to New York State University to learn some engineering techniques. So I'm constantly evolving and learning. And what I've realized is whatever information I have, we need to share. We need to create a platform for an Indian community or international community, so we can continue to develop those programs. Because I feel that most of these programs, these techniques, management techniques, technology techniques, however you want to look at it, organizational techniques, are very focused into a higher education system. So we're trying to create an envelope where we can make it available for a broader spectrum of professionals, engineers, architects, owners, developers, and of course the students who want to come into the construction and civil design and engineering fields. So that's really the goal of our institution, is really fundamentally focused on three things. We basically want to make sure that a large tool sets, construction project management, planning, resource management, schedule management, estimation, and you can see a whole slew of construction management portals that we are trying to come up with. The idea is really to come up with the best and the most current sets of tools available in the market. It doesn't matter if it's an international market or national market. I think management techniques are worldwide very utilized and maybe underutilized in India, to the extent because they're not sometimes our engineering colleges, our institutions don't necessarily give us the updated information. So the techniques are also the goal here is to really give you the classic examples of what happens in the market, in real market, not even institutions. So sometimes institutions are misguided into very higher end of techniques which you can think about and we can barely use on regular projects. So we're trying to find a balance between an education curriculum that is more realistic. The second thing we want to do is it's not a one-stop training portal for anyone. So once we finish the education, the goal is to follow an Harvard mentality, where it's a constant educational learning through bringing in phenomenal resources from outside to speak with us as speakers. So students are getting access on a constant learning portal, new projects across the world, where our panelists are going to come in and discuss about new techniques, their projects. So it's going to be a very interactive section. So it doesn't stop after you finish the curriculum. The webcasts and webinars are going to be available live to most of the people. But if you are a student of NIBT, they will always be available for you. The third thing we want to focus on is leadership and entrepreneurship. Our goal is to make sure the professional environment within the construction industries is professional and entrepreneur. So we want to teach you the business techniques of fundamental, how to set up a business. So we go through all the pieces about managing taxes, what the entrepreneurs do, how the project planners do, what project managers do, what assistant project managers do, what are the field teams doing, and what tools they're using to give their career a boost. These techniques are becoming very strong in India. Last week we had, or earlier this week we had, Autodesk do a phenomenal presentation in Bangalore. It was really worth it. But I think we saw most of that tool, or most of the presentation focused on modern techniques, right? Because the modern techniques of digitization are completely changing how we do construction management. And there are many other webcasts. If you go, we have done multiple webcasts on the technology portal side of it. We have done webcasts on RERA and how the RERA portion works into this. So we're looking at government policies. We're looking at government initiatives, how much funding is going in. We're looking at many other options and making sure that the most latest information is passed on to our students. That's really the fundamental part of National Institute of Building Technology, is to basically have a very focused and up-to-date curriculum and then continue to evolve and let the students evolve as we continue to go. So we'll be starting the courses very soon. This presentation is really to give everyone an idea of what we want to focus on, how our process is, what we want to teach. So this particular project we can get started on is construction project planning. And if at the end of the session, we'll open it for Q&A. Your Q&As will be answered through an email. So it won't be a direct answer in this session especially. But feel free to communicate with us. Go and join our Facebook portal because you're constantly giving new articles, new information. Make sure you're signed up and registered on our website because we're constantly putting out new information about projects, about new tools, anything that we learn across industry. I mostly focus on American development, and we work nationally. We work projects across the nation in the United States. So my job is to bring you the latest and the greatest across the globe, but into an Indian context. That's really my goal here. So let's jump into the project planning phase. So essentially what happens in a construction project is every single construction project needs planning. I don't think there is anyone who can build a project in time and within the budget if they are not planned, right? I think we all agree on this concept. The question is, what does that even mean? What are the tools? And that's really the key. What are the tools and techniques and management styles that are responsible for a successful or unsuccessful project, right? So that's what we want to focus in this curriculum. So what is the agenda of today's presentation? Is really focusing on those 5 topics. Kind of understanding what is construction project planning, types of construction project planning, steps in construction project planning tools, and how construction project planning is essential. And it is really fundamental to any single project. It doesn't matter what kind of project you're doing. This course is really more structured towards all the categories, right? From the owner, developer, people who are investing their own finances, what reporting they're expecting, what resource management the construction team has to do in the field, out of the field, how are the procurement techniques going to be part of construction project planning. So it goes to different phases, right? So that's really the goal of this project. This presentation is not a course, right? This presentation is an overview of what we will be teaching in the course and what infrastructure we'll be teaching you, what softwares we're teaching you, what techniques we're teaching you. That's really this presentation is about. So let's understand the introduction to project planning, right? So it's basically, if you really zoom in, you will see the task, right? Every project is flow of thousands and 500s, and I don't know, you can keep naming, and I've seen schedules that are 20,000 task item long, and it depends on the structural, mechanical, whoever downstream comes into it, and everything kind of falls in place if the project is planned better. It goes down to estimation, right? Because a fundamental to finishing a project in time is money, right? Without the cost, project tends to spend less and it creates problem. Cost overflow goes up into change orders or escalation in the cost, which creates a problem to either the owners or the contractors. And really it boils down to how do you manage the time? And time is relative to resources, right? How many people are part of the resources? Can you bring in more resources and can you reduce time? And sometimes they're indirectly proportional, right? If you can increase resources, you will reduce time, but it's not an angular curve. It curves and flattens at some time. So after a certain time, no matter how many resources you put in, the duration really won't go. And those are the techniques you have to understand, what time the graph goes flat and what time you should think about other techniques of solving crisis on a project. How do you identify different tasks and plan different tasks? And we'll get into the critical path method in a minute. So construction project management offers solutions, right? So what needs to be done, how to do it, how does it happen, right? Or who does it happen to, or what these are the questions that we are asking in the project planning, right? We sit in the front with the team in front and says, okay, what is our goal here? Is it money? Is it time? Is it delivering a quality project, right? If I ask you any one of them, most of you will probably say all of the above, right? So, but it has to be planned, right? So there are one of the very key ingredients to understanding the concept of any project is a derivative of three things, right? This is what I was told, and it is time, cost, and quality, right? Remember this: time, cost, and quality, the three essential ingredients to any project. The problem happens is where we always see that these three ingredients, you can only pick two, right? You can only control the two, and the third is a derivative of the two. What it means is, if you say, okay, I want something in time and I'm ready to spend as much money as you can, and if it's a fast track project, so the moment you increase the time scale, your quality depreciates, right? If you want to say, okay, I want fast track and I want phenomenal quality, then the cost escalates. So these three ingredients are extremely important, and as long as they work in balance, the projects tend to deliver on all the three fronts, right? So we have to understand how to balance these things. What are the priorities here? Sometimes the priorities up front are quality, getting a better infrastructure in place, and that is really the key ingredient that I have seen, right? Starting strong, there is no alternate. If you don't start strong, it's going to be very difficult to finish the project strong. People, it doesn't matter in our life, in our project management techniques, in our life, if we don't have a good head start and we are not fundamentally based on a foundation that is strong, the project is going to struggle all the way through. So these are the questions and discussion that happens in the upfront of the project. And what we are trying to do is trying to get you focused on what are those questions, how to understand these questions, how to brainstorm this question, how to plan for these questions, what questions should be asked. So as I was telling, three ingredients, right? So you can see these three ingredients, and quality is missing here, but I think quality is kind of a subjective matter for a lot of people, and sometimes it's not subjective, right? So there are fundamental pieces to quality. Quality is governed by code. Quality is governed by, if you are international markets, there are ASHRAE, there are international plumbing codes, there are mechanical codes, there are building codes, and those codes determine how the quality is controlled across the board. There is a bare minimum requirement. So fundamentally, we are required to follow those bare minimum requirements. The second portion of it comes down to cost and scheduling, right? Some projects are extremely time oriented, right? Some projects are essentially resource oriented, right? We have limited resources. So the resource is what we have to focus on and make sure that we're planning the resources. It's a special project. You're doing a sanitary sewage treatment plant. So you have a set of people that can do this perform works. There are direct costs and there are indirect costs. And we'll get into the concepts of direct costs and indirect costs in a minute. We don't want to get into the details of how to manage them, but we're just trying to understand the terminologies and understanding what is going to be taught in the project planning. The key thing here is not a course, right? The essential thing is not, we're not going to show a video. We don't want to show necessarily a curriculum of basic, a generic way of doing a project planning. The idea is to have a discussion within the students. The idea is to show you cases of where such plannings were utilized, how they were used, what failed, what was successful. So bringing in different players within the course curriculum and across, like it won't happen during the course maybe, but you will have access to different fundamentals, different people, different panels, so that these questions are constantly asked, and new tools, new processes, and new systems and lessons learned are really put in front of all of us. So these are the two things, right? Basically, cost oriented is direct costs and indirect costs, and you can go through the summary. I think we all know what it basically means, but these are extremely important. We tend to sometimes focus on the direct cost, right? You can always see the projects are planned well with direct cost, but it's the indirect cost that really which causes the problem. And the indirect cost is what we call as general conditions, right? General conditions. If you're a contractor, we need to understand the general conditions, because a lot of times a contractor, main prime contractor, kind of subcontracts everything out, right? So his direct costs are rock solid. As long as the risks are managed well, the indirect costs are where they get problem, which are indirect costs are their own costs, right? So how to plan for general conditions is really the fundamental to making profits for the prime contractors. So schedule, right? When we are time crunched, there are a lot of techniques that are taught across, right? There is critical path method, there is earn value method, there are many methods, and we'll be talking about how to create these methods, how to interlock them. It's not just okay, this task after this task after this task. It is about how much float you have, how much drag you want to put in, what are the contingency plannings you're putting into the critical path method. So these are all the planning options when you talk about time oriented. Then we have a resource oriented path, which is really focused on, as I was explaining, how people are interacting with the schedule, and you're only managing to a limited resources because those are skilled people. Or you have a focused time where you need to get in, do something, and come out, and that's where the resource comes into a long run. You'll see resource planning heavily used on a linear, like you're building roads and bridges. You'll see resource planning being a critical path because it's the same crew that is on a in a same sequence. It needs to go in the same sequence, continue to follow through a linear path. And resource planning becomes extremely important because if one person is not following, right, if one person is not following, has a lag, so at some point you'll realize the crew is idle because they're waiting for someone else to finish the work, and that's the key, right? So in a linear side of the projects, you'll see resource oriented apply more so than a critical path method. So steps in construction project planning, obviously this is where we'll focus on, right? We'll have live projects that we are constructing, we're doing, and we'll get you involved to understand how the projects are planned, right? Understanding the work breakdown structure, and work breakdown structure follows through key milestones and charts, and what are the charts and how the charts should be read and what kind of charts you should be maintaining across the project. What we want to focus on is giving you some tools, right? Giving you Primavera P6 scheduling planning. So we'll be teaching you this, teaching you the softwares. There are separate programs we have built only for softwares. We prefer as a prerequisite to this course, you take our Primavera classes or Microsoft, one of the two. It doesn't matter. They both do a good job. At least the one of the two you should know beforehand. And as a prerequisite, you're required to take it from our university. And once you know this, we'll be using them extensively in this course. So essentially, right? So again, see, this is the three things I was talking about earlier. You have time, quality, and resources could be money. So the goal is there's a scope that is well defined, and that's really anyone. If you're a subcontractor doing electrical work, if you're a mechanical contractor, you're a concrete contractor, you're brick masonry, or you're a prime contractor, any field that you go to, it is important for you to understand the scope of work is the fundamental to any project planning. If the scope doesn't include something, doesn't exclude something, it is not derived well. And you can see that from tenders, right? So tender is a good example of scope. So you see tenders coming out, and the tenders are the prime scope. So people who write tenders, how the quantities are defined, what to understand within the tenders, where to put your money. Do you want to front load your tender? Do you want to back end the tender? It's all the plannings depending upon how the project, how a contractor wants to handle a project. And you'll see if the scope is the same, you'll see different costs coming into picture. And why is this happening? Is it because we're getting different numbers on the same tender? Is it a factor of who wants to make less profit or more profit? No, I don't think it is. I think it's a factor of everyone has a fundamental. Yeah, it could be a little bit less or more profit, but I think the fundamental factor is planning of how they want to finish it. Some people tend to plan better so they can save more resources. And because they can save more resources, their bids are more competitive than others, but that doesn't mean they're making less profit. So this is extremely important, right? To balance these three things so your tenders are most competitive out in the market. That's basically the curriculum of this particular course. There are about 30-40 courses out there focusing on construction management. We're coming up with leadership programs for executives so that we can continue to develop on how to manage resources on an executive level and things like that. If you have any questions, please feel free to send us an email. You can type your questions in the chat menu today. I'll let this run for another 5-10 minutes so you can post all your questions, and we'll get back to you with an email. Make sure you continue to look at our website. We are constantly developing new programs. We're constantly bringing new panels. We're always doing something different. So it is important you're registered, so you're planned well. These courses, this courses and the panel training and the panel presentations are not going to be available for everyone. At least we might make it available live, but the video recordings and the key ingredients behind them, the resources or the books or anything that comes with it, will be only available to our students. So that's our goal. Feel free to, we have an on-campus training program that we are focusing on technologies and BIM management and all those things. So we do have an on-campus program. Most of the construction management is off campus. We are trying to develop an on-campus portal for it into different cities. So stay tuned, and we are excited about this new journey and the new way of learning construction management. Thank you for joining today.